Rader, excuse me, who I just had the pleasure of meeting for the first time. Matt Rader is the author of several books, including the forthcoming critical memoir, Visual Inspection. He teaches at the University of British Columbia at Okanagan.
Trash? That's the end of my presentation. I am so grateful to be here. I traveled 9 hours to be here, and just within the first few minutes of being at this symposium, it was like that 9 hours didn't even happen. This is great. I'm so happy to be here. Someone did not number my notes, pages, so here we go. Okay, so my presentation, I'm sure that I said to the organizers it's called In My Home. That's not really what it's called, but that's how I do things. It is called De-Universalizing Disability, Disabled Made Accessible Art. And let me get this view out of my bifocals. Oh. It's fine how it is. Thank you. Hey, change. I'm going to start with a story. I have a non-disabled friend. She's a rehabilitation clinician. I just want to put that out there as a little context in case you hear this story and think, oh, come on, you're blowing it up, Cheryl. But so this non-disabled friend, she watched my film called In My Home, which we're going to see today. And she told me she admires how committed I am to doing inclusive films. And the issue for me is that In My Home is not a film about inclusion, and it's not inclusive either. It only has disabled people in it. It's very exclusive. This is not inclusive. But for her, good laughs of recognition at a disability studies conference. I do a lot of like the speech therapy conference and stuff, and I find myself apologizing a lot there. Don't need to do it here. But so for this friend, the presence or even the mention of disability evokes specialized services like hers, calling things inclusive. And I think a lot of people use inclusive as a euphemism for disability. We have so many euphemisms, and I really think that's one of them. I think it comes from these biases. It's a positive intent. I fully believe it's a positive intent, but the impact is not always comfortable, and I think that's what really counts. Inclusive film, question mark. This slide shows pictures of the three people in the film, and I'll describe the picture. Eric is a white male presenting person in a black jacket and a beret. He's sitting and looking down at a fuzzy black dog that's standing on his wheelchair footplates and reaching up towards Eric's face. This is like pre-doggy person kiss. That's not captured in the picture. Kiersey is the next person, a South Asian Indian woman in a leather jacket. She sits and smiles while looking out the window. And Yulia, a white woman who's sitting in a power wheelchair with a breathing tube near her head. She wears a leopard print shirt and has a chubby black and white cat sitting on her lap. Now this film was made for the Free Our People film contest last year, 2017. It was a 1-month film contest about addressing the institutional bias we have toward institutionalizing disabled people. And it was just open, just make what you will based on that theme. And I wanted to make sure that I did not make a film that said, we three people want to live in the community just like everybody else. That was my goal, just don't make that film. That's how to free our people, just like everybody else. Because as Finkelstein asked in 1987, but what does everybody else mean here? When we describe disabled people as quote unquote just like everybody else, well, I think we're reinforcing a divide that isn't actually as clear as we're making it sound with that statement. So who is included in this everybody else category? Do we actually agree that disabled people are inherently a different group from non-disabled people? I don't know. I have existed in both worlds. I'm still the same person. Why would I want to always be included in and approved by the group that repeatedly excludes my community? This is a big problem for me with inclusion. Why do I want to come to your party? I've never been allowed to. Why is it the best party? It's not. What if I'm dreaming another type of community that wants something different from inclusion into quote-unquote normal society, where all the ableism trash lives? I gotta stick to my notes, sorry. And so that's why I didn't want to make a film that we should stop institutionalizing disabled people because they're just like everyone else. And there's another way that people, I feel, diminish the reality of disability experience. And that's by erasing the presence of disability even while talking about disability and intending to amplify it. So I have this other friend who does not work in rehab. She made a film about people with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and I told her that I don't have OCD and I can't relate to what that feels like, but because of my traumatic brain injury and lifelong anxiety, I've had anxiety longer than I've been alive, I'm pretty sure at this point. Because of those things, the brain injury and the anxiety, I related to so many things from her movie about what it's like to live in a world with a mind that is not accommodated. And here's her response. She said, thank you. And then she said, wow, I never imagined someone with a brain injury would relate to my movie so well. But that makes sense. After all, it's just a film about the human condition. No, to me it's not a film about the human condition. To me it's a film about people with OCD, because it's a film about people with OCD. And they are the only people in the film, and they talk about their experiences around it. And for me, to take a specific experience and make it universal when it isn't, is to erase it, even though the film does not erase OCD at all. It's just in how she was talking about it to me. And I have these questions. How do we ensure that we uplift disabled people as much as possible? How do we remain vigilant and mindful and careful to accept other people's stories? I believe that disabled-made art, no matter what the topic is a powerful way for us to fight against universalizing us, against erasing us, against making assumptions about us. It's how we bring to the forefront whatever our quest is. Could be disability rights, disability justice, disability culture, all the parts of ourselves, our communities, and our identities that we want to give attention to. So in a moment, we're gonna watch In My Home, the film. I filmed and edited it, keeping in mind that it was going to have captions and audio description. I'm lucky that I'm a filmmaker and a captioner and an audio describer. It's really hard to convince filmmakers to figure out how to add this in when they've made a film without thinking of it. You've got mouths, big old close-up faces and mouths down in the caption space. You've got people talking wall to wall and no room for audio description. So I don't know that I completely hit the mark, but I definitely, before I even started filming, knew don't put my mouth down at the center at the bottom, because that's where my captions will be, and make some space for audio description. Because for me, they're not afterthoughts. They're not about compliance. For me, they're part of the art. And a film is not complete till they have them. And I feel like they make accessibility and access needs explicit, and that's gorgeous. This film explores love, relationships, choice, and animals, which a lot of different types of people will watch the film and say they can relate to those things, the love and the animals. But the thing is that it's not that they're universal and that everybody experiences love and animals in the same way. These things around love and expression and animals and home and all of that are constantly in the context of the three people's economic realities, their gendered realities, and their racial realities. So this is 6 minutes long with audio description in English and French captions, and I hope you enjoy it. You can watch me fiddle with the computer. Yulia.
I have never lived in an institution, but I have many close friends that have.
Eric.
I've lived my entire life in fear of institutionalization.
Government policies and funding should not perpetuate the forced segregation, isolation, or institutionalization of people with disabilities of any age. World Institute on Disability, 1999. Kiersey.
Our liberation is tied to others, right?
Title, In My Home. Colored bars and circles shift across the screen. Now thick clouds slowly pass by. Then Yulia, a white woman, sits in a power chair with a tuxedo cat on her lap.
I love this house.
Drawings hang on bright green walls.
I don't want anything white. I want color, lots of color.
Animal figurines and potted plants.
This house makes me feel calm, creative.
Sculptures of human torsos made of wire on the wall.
It's very accessible.
Yulia passes chalk drawings on the wall of people riding wheels.
It makes me feel happy to be able to offer to friends in need as well.
People should live where they want to live and have informed choices about where they want to live.
Eric holds the cat.
So I like to be out. Having your own space, you can make your own rules. At the adult foster care home, I could only be out for a certain amount of time. I've just started dating and going out and being social.
Eric and Yulia's hands dance on a tabletop.
I don't think people expect people with disabilities to have relationships all the time. I like people being able to see that I'm actually in a relationship. It's engraved on the inside, with love, Yulia.
With love, Yulia.
And Yulia says, with
With
love,
love,
Eric.
Eric.
One of the things about moving into an institution that's really scary is potentially not being able to live with my partner.
The breeze blows apart a dandelion puff. Kiersey, a South Indian American woman who experiences CP, and her gray tuxedo cat.
Rowena, she's a ball of energy.
The cat chews on a pineapple.
One of the nicest of little cats. A little sassful, and I love her.
Knocks the pineapple to the ground, then plays with an orange.
I could never even think about having a pet in the adult foster care home because so many other needs weren't taken care of. I was in survivor mode all the time.
Kiersey waves a cat toy for Rowena.
He's the best dog in the whole world. He's my emotional support.
A small black dog steps onto the wheelchair footplates.
If we were stuck in a nursing home or institution, we wouldn't be able to have our animals with us.
The cat walks across Yulia.
Onyx, 10-year-old,
The dog stares up.
gender neutral, up for anything, loves people, loves to chase balls.
Trots off with a ball in his mouth. The cat asleep.
Lefty is ready to party. She always has her tuxedo on. Her favorite activity is looking at squirrels. They're part of our family.
Printed curtains, a tree with leaves in the shape of hearts, lovebirds nuzzling.
I can do anything in this house. I can choose to leave or not, when to go to bed or not.
Eric, Yulia, and another pass slices of pie back and forth.
I still make my own choices about when I go out, where I go out to, how long, and who comes over.
Forks held high, they inch their forks toward the pie in slow motion, then eat. Sun peeks through pink blossoms. A metal bed on display in a muddy yard. Eric, a male-identified short-stature individual, lies on the bed.
It's about curves instead of straight lines. It's about color versus grayness, freedom and confinement. It's about love and expression of love and expression of self. It's this interplay of an institutional bed, the confinement of that,
He dances with slightly hyperextended fingers.
also the freedom of nature and being outside.
Gently touches the headboard bars.
I think it's shame. I think it's that you sort of put the person where you can't see them anymore. I think it's literally like shame and embarrassment that puts people in institutions.
No freedom of choice at all. Makes me feel being stuck in bed, stuck inside. No choice of where I want to go, how I want things done.
A painting, all you need is love and a cat.
I'm happy to be here because I'm still recovering from the suffering that I experienced while in the adult foster care home and the hardship I had to go through.
Grabs a drink from the fridge, the cat flicks her tail. Kiersey types on her laptop.
What I value about having my own space is just have space to live.
Outside, she smiles and laughs as the camera sweeps past her in the courtyard. Credits roll. Filmmaker Cheryl Green. Featuring Yulia Arakelian, Kiersey Coleman, Eric Ferguson. Animation Fox D. Music Gentle Wind, Cell, Sorrow the Sun, and No Need to Sleep by Ketsa. Video assets, Phil Freed. Audio assets, Damien Minnie. Thank you. Coverage Defense Committee, Julian Morris, Thea Burns-Janicek. Copyright 2017, Cheryl Green.
Thank you. I've been told I sound like an NPR host. I know your description. Sorry. I'm sorry, not sorry. I feel like I know you already opened it in this other thing and we closed it.
Oh, I just wanted to put my contact info up there. I do a lot of video work. I have a podcast. I'm also a producer, an audio producer for the Disability Visibility podcast. It is transcribed, so it is accessible through audio and text. I make screen reader accessible transcripts, as well as they're on Google Docs, so many ways to access Disability Visibility podcast. But my own podcast and my film work is all there at whoamiitostopit.com. That's the name of my feature-length documentary about isolation, stigma, and transformation after traumatic brain injury through the arts. It is not about rehab, but you probably already guessed that at this point. And the last thing I wanted to say, and I'll be done, because I'm probably out of time, is that the audio descriptions, when you heard me describe the people themselves, were written by them. Some of them were more or less visual or descriptive, maybe than I would do on my own, but it was important to me that it have, since they were not involved in the editing, I did all the editing choices by myself. The dance in the bed was Eric's idea. Eric and Yulia they have a professional dance company. So a lot of that was his idea, but in terms of the audio description, I wanted at least some element of participation from them, since I was going to be editing and shaping their stories. So just wanted to point out that neat thing about collaboration and audio descriptions. Ask people, how would you like me to describe what you look like? So, thank you, everyone.
It would be great if folks do a quieter applause just for the session. Thanks.
Please go ahead. Sorry, for those who came in late, it's just an accommodation request to snap fingers.
I figured out how to see my paper and talking to this mic. My name's Matt Rader. I came from Kelowna, BC yesterday night. I'm very grateful to be here. I really echo your comments at the beginning. That was just, as soon as I was in, I texted somebody at 11 o'clock this morning saying I'm already crying. Just to hear really like-minded kinds of comments, that's what I felt like kind of coming home. So I'm kind of an accidental and maybe reluctant academic. I have been a poet and a literary writer for most of my life. I worked freelance writer for 15 years, and then I ended up in this job at UBC where they wanted me to reimagine myself as a researcher. So I kind of did that, and I had this grant project that I did with some folks, which is what I'm going to tell you about. But I was supposed to write an essay, and the essay turned into a book. And then I realized that I wasn't really writing it for an academic audience. I was writing a work of art. And this book is called Visual Inspection, and it comes out in the spring. It is written for an audience of poetry readers, and it most closely resembles poetry, but it's really a repertoire of genres. So I'm trying out genres like memoir and reportage and some academic. At certain points, I'm trying to use academic rhetoric, the shapes of academic rhetoric, to do something different. As such, I'm going to redo the introduction. I think it takes about 10 minutes to read. The book has 4 main parts: an introduction. The biggest part is a section called notes, which are very discursive. They go all over the place. Another section called Endnotes, where I approximate being an academic and actually try and talk about some of the objections I can imagine people might have to the things that we did. And then a Coda. I'm telling you all that because I don't think that this introduction really captures the whole book. I think you actually need to read the book, experience the book like you do a work of art in order to actually get what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, I'm gonna give it a shot. This is the first time I've read from this book and I'm nervous. I was born with difficulty breathing. Doctors guessed cystic fibrosis. They were wrong. My first memories of being in hospital, several internal organs were enlarged. They were testing for cancer. Rows of cribs, large hands, wires and machines. I was less than a year old. I did not have cancer. My mother carried me blue and gasping into the emergency room more times than she can recollect over those first 3 years. At 4, when we moved from the city to a small fishing village on Vancouver Island, my mom insisted on a house within minutes of the hospital. 1980s. We'd go to the hospital in the evening. They'd shoot me with adrenaline. After, my eyes wide, my heart racing, I'd try to jump out of my skin, running around the house into the late hours of the night. It is always night in my memory. Full of the drug our bodies produce when we most fear for our lives. I don't remember fearing for my life. I imagine the nurses and doctors feared for my life. In saving my life, they injected that fear into my body, literally. I know my mother feared for my life. She spent the first 18 years helping me seek an answer. We searched daily, we accepted some stories, we rejected others. Nothing explained what happened with me beyond the idea of hyperactive immune responses to my environment, to my emotions. All treatments address symptoms, nothing else. When I took over the search in my 20s, my largely inexplicable medical history continued to accumulate. I had the rarest form of appendicitis the weekend my mom moved from my childhood home after her divorce. I saw 5 specialists to address why half of my lip had been swollen for a year. Guess what the answer was? No answer. And I did trials of breathing medications for 3 years, measuring the peak flow of my breath 4 times a day, every day. By the time I was 30, I was racked by pervasive and debilitating pain. Sometimes searching for something guarantees you'll never find it. Sometimes what you are looking for obscures what it is you find in your search. You have to see not what you're looking for, but what is there. Pain is different from suffering. Pain is a condition of the physical body. It can be assuaged or it can't. To suffer is to insist emotionally that things be different, to refuse clarity. This book starts with an epigraph from Robert Frost that says to have a guide who has at heart you are getting lost. Behold beyond confusion, Robert Frost writes in Directive, the poem from which I've borrowed the epigraph to this book. In that poem, to return to a place that no longer exists and to become whole again can only be achieved by getting lost. Though many people in pain suffer, this is the basic difference between pain and suffering, clarity or confusion. To be sure, clarity can, often does, increase pain, but it relieves suffering. I've rarely suffered from my health. I've even more rarely written about it explicitly. My health in all its qualities, good and ill, is a basic fact of my life and indistinguishable from my existence. Where do you locate health in your body? Easier to ask where you locate ill health? Curious that only certain qualities of health seem to assert themselves on the conscious level. In my writing, in my poems specifically, I've always felt my health, my body, as a silent, invisible, but active presence. It was there because the materials of the poems, the language, was sifted through my body. I didn't know how to make it explicit, and I didn't feel a need to. Robert Pinsky writes in The Sounds of Poetry that the instrument of the poet is the breath of the reader. And if the poet is the first reader, as Paul Muldoon asserts in the end of the poem, the poet's breath is the instrument of composition. If you listen, you can hear Charles Olson in the hazy Blue Ridge Mountains sighing wearily, I told you so. He did like 100 years ago. The world is experienced through our bodies. Our ideas are formed less than we'd like to admit through intellect. We have feelings or experiences, as T.S. Eliot would have it, and through them we arrive at what we say we know. From 2015 to 2017, I conducted a research creation project at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, called Visual Inspection. And remember, this is written for like a general poetry readership. Research creation is the term the Canadian Academy uses to describe academic research projects with artistic outcomes. Though dressed up as academic inquiry, visual inspection was always, first and foremost, an art project conducted by artists. Originally, the project asked a basic question. If the page is a field of visual composition in contemporary poetry, and it is such a field, how can we as poets make the field available to non-visual learners in a manner that is consistent with our own individual aesthetic preferences? What would we make? At first, this seemed like a translation problem. How to account for the white space and typographic experiments in a poetic composition through audio or haptic renditions. Think recordings of poems read aloud, braille, or even poems printed in 3D according to a particular algorithm. With this wrinkle, how to also appeal to the poet as a poet, to be consistent with the poet's compositional practice, with the pleasure and realization of that practice. It was important that this was a compositional question rather than a critical one. It was not praxis even, but something more instinctual, something approaching from the opposite direction, having yet to encounter the need for a term like praxis. It was important because the site of inquiry existed beyond the scope of critical assessment as such. But soon, even more a priori concerns appeared. It's axiomatic, but worth stating nonetheless, that our lives are shaped by our bodies, how our bodies function, how they interact with our environments, both social and ecological. And if our bodies shape our lives, then they must also shape our poems. When I began the project in the fall of 2014, I was having considerable difficulty typing as the result of several immunological conditions, some that had been with me from the start and others that had developed in adulthood. At times, I couldn't even hold open a book. Over the course of the project, my life was dramatically shaped by these conditions. Among other things, I made upwards of 200 visits to the Rutland Aurora Health Clinic, a space dedicated to people with complicated health histories and or precarious socioeconomic status. I received more than 600 injections. I traveled through British Columbia to see specialists in rheumatology, immunology, respirology, internal medicine, dermatology, and psychiatry. Both at home and away, I received massage therapy, Traeger massage, physiotherapy, chiropractic treatments, acupuncture, hypnosis, cupping, moxibustion, chakra healing, qigong, and traditional Chinese medicine. Twice I received emergency life-saving medical intervention. I spent 4 days trussed to an IV on a hospital bed across from a room called Dirty Service in the hallway of 4B at Kelowna General Hospital. For 2 years, I spent 60 to 70 minutes of my day every day attached to a machine that helped me breathe. Never mind the details of my austere diet and the regime of pharmaceuticals I experimented with. Never mind the hundreds of hours traveling for treatment or given up to convalescence. How did this shape my poetry? The list above is a chain of references awash in connotation. It employs specific elements of my life to suggest something more general about what it was like in this body over the years of the visual inspection project. This book is a similarly devised response to the question of how bodies shape poetry. Under the Hampton News Scholars Award, the primary grant funding visual inspection, I named 2 former collaborators, poet Jordan Scott and social practice artist Carmen Papel. Both Scott, who has a significant stutter, and Papel, who is legally blind, had through close attention used their bodies as sites of artistic composition. In one such composition, Scott designed poems to challenge his ability to say them out loud, thus creating a collaboration between the text and his body, in which his body became a vehicle for endless variations of the poems. In one of Papel's works, he has a small marching band follow him through a city street playing directional cues as he performs everyday tasks like buying a burrito. And this too is axiomatic, but bears repeating nonetheless. There is no body from which all other bodies might be assessed for deviation. Only the body of our imaginations of culture. Similarly, there is no normal poetry, syntax, grammar, or typography. There are only the normative categories cultures practice at any given moment in history. A while ago, Papel stopped using the word blind to describe himself and replaced it with non-visual learner, because there is also no normal blind body, only many iterations of bodies with different relationships to sight and visual information. The narrative frame of the text that composes most of this book is an eyes-closed walking tour Papel led for about 35 people in July of 2016 through a portion of downtown Kelowna. Just as our tour stretched an accordion, stumbled and stalled and continued as people called out obstacles down the line and slapped railings so we could hear what was coming. As the presence and commentary of passers-by became important aspects of the tour experience, this text proceeds in fragments, associations, and leaps, dragging in a number of histories, references, and preoccupations. Like the tour, it is possible, likely even, that it arrives where it began. Like the tour, this may even be by design, though that is probably revisionist history. As I write elsewhere in the end, perhaps the best I can say about the question raised by this project is that I've had some thoughts. This is a record of some thoughts. Thank you.
So I will be sharing some of Jim Ferris's poetry with you. He was unable to come to the conference. He regrets not being able to come, but he had a medical emergency in his immediate family, so he needed to change plans. Jim is a poet and performance scholar, and recently his work has been interrogating not only some of the issues that were already brought up in the panel today about specific lived disability experiences, also about how, I know he's very interested in how his poetry is informed by his disability and impairment experiences. But he's added a new element into interrogating racial identity into his work. He is part of an interracial family, I think, for about the past 10 years. He's white, and he's married to a black woman who has 2 black children that have become a family unit. And then he also has discovered, I'm not sure exactly when, but that that there was a family secret, and that was that he had, I think the poems will make it clear, he has great grandparents, I think they were great grandparents or great grandparents who were by the census identified as black, and then their identities changed and they were reclassified as white. So he's exploring these histories within his own family and how those secrets are carried on purportedly white bodies. So that's a little bit of the background of some of his work. Okay, this poem is called Who Here? Who here has not profited? The children of slaveholders with the children of those enslaved. Who has not? They want me to shut up, live, and let live. The profiteers of horror say, and those and who here have not profited from horror. A movie, Halloween, party on Saturday night. You know you want to. Forgiveness on Sunday, no admission required. Boys will be boys. Who has not? That man over there rocks back and forth, over and over. Who here? How long before we too are forgotten? The spoils of horror, Who has not, never seemed to spoil until you look intently? What are your intentions, he asked. Who here has not profited? I thought, who? I was lying when I mumbled some answer, although I thought I spoke the truth from horror. Who here? A truth. I would not know if it bit me. I have been bitten. I thought I was smarter than most people, not you, but most people. Who here has not already, after midnight, turned the clock back? Maybe Dad won't realize. They call this sea level. They call the pipes plumb. I wait. Who here? By the phone. And there are still telephones. Who here has not profited? My great-great-grands met on Mars plantation. Who here has not? My great-great-grands owned, no ran, no lived in the shadow, toiled under the thumb, let us say, of the plantation. Can we ever be said to own these bodies? Poor cripple, poor blind girl, call her bluff. History is writ on those backs. Who here? Our great-greats were the them we cannot now escape. I never knew. I always knew. Who here has not? Who is not the them? And did they grow fat and sassy? And did they grow small? And did they learn the surgical horizon? Rather than have another drink and watch the game on TV down in front of you, but is it a boil to lance? Or is it a cancer? Who here has not? And where is an answer without pain? Sorry, but we who know pain will not kill you. You tell us no pain, no gain, time to man up, tender ones. Forces of delirious nature, buck up, little gods. Who here has not profited? Let's roll. This one is entitled On June 19th. Driving through the old neighborhood where I used to live when I was new here, poking along on the thoroughfare, black Ford pickup in front of me guns it and passes a Saturn doing maybe 25, 30 in a 40 zone, where everybody goes 45 anyway, past Hawkins School, 6 o'clock, just before the longest day of the year. I go by too, glance over, African-American woman, couldn't see how old, drives like 80. What do they mean, white privilege? The sun makes everybody squint. Sunglasses help, polarizing especially. Everybody gets away with driving a little too fast, don't they? Nation of laws with a little give and take. Who's giving? Who or what's getting taken? At the grocer's I buy some ice cream, pecan praline. There are as many black people as white in the store, rare up here. I buy some limeade concentrate too. Need to find the rose water now. Years ago I thought about buying a Saturn, car named for a planet, but I didn't. Now they're orphans, and I'm driving a Subaru, made in Lafayette, Indiana, and named after a constellation in the black distance of the night sky. This piece is called White Elephant. In feudal Europe, if a woman committed adultery, her husband would sometimes tie her down, catch a mouse, and trap it under a cup on her bare belly until it gnawed itself out. Now are you afraid of mice? Judy Gran, a woman is talking to death. A word from our sponsors. 2 shot. White man next to an elephant. Humongous savings. See you. White men, white mice in white man's hands. Teeny weeny prizes. Establishing shot. Man, mice, elephant. Now who do you know who wants to buy a car? Prices. He meant prices. I have a car. Caramelized bronze between elephant and mouse. Tiny red-headed boy. I am not eating pudding behind the door. If elephants fear mice and mice fear everything, Where did you get the pudding you are not eating behind the door? White elephants have nothing to fear. We don't have another plate. I'll just eat what the kids leave. Grains of white rice. I'll just eat behind the door. Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Don't hate the mousy because it's white. Humongous savings. I'm not eating whiteness behind the door. Teeny weeny prizes. Where did you get the whiteness you are not eating behind the door? White man, white mice, white elephant, white rice. Who do you know now? This one is called Hands. I want to ride an airplane. Step into. The machine reads anomalies, he says. I have many anomalies to read, I say. Step. Over here, he says. They put their hands on me. They speak in tongues. I cannot find my tongue. They speak in a tongue I have never heard. They pray for me to be changed forever, to make me like them. Step. Forward, your Lord and Savior. They put their hands on me. They press and probe this estranged body. They measure and poke and measure. Machines will take the oddest pictures. Measure twice, cut once. Cut again, step. Over here, he says. They seek to change me forever, to make me more like them. They put their hands on me. Why are you uneven? What befell your symmetry? Would you like a private screening? They put their hands on me. We are nice to crippled people. We will make you safe and sound. We are nice to the less fortunate. Someone must want you around. Would you like a private screening? Male assist, male assist. Would you like a private screening? Step. Over here. Why are you so uneven? Male assist, male assist. Would you like a private screening? Step. Over here. I'm going to touch you now. Would you like? I'm going to run my hands over sensitive areas, your private area, outside on the concrete apron. Why do they call it an apron? Mom wore an apron. Would you like, would you, they do if I dropped my trousers? What would they do if I shot the moon? Would you like, sir, you're not allowed to. Sir, you're not allowed to. Would you like, sir, would you like a private? Oh, would you like me to touch now? Would you like male assist? Private screening, would you like? Would they put their hands on me? This poem is called Difficult. Are you trying to be difficult? I'm not trying. You're not trying at all. Walk like this. I am walking like that. You're not. And you're not even trying. I am trying to be difficult. Not to be difficult, to do the right thing. Then to do the right thing. You're not even trying. That worm tries harder. That ant, that single-celled paramecium tries harder than you. If you tried, you could walk, see, hear, sing, dance, think. Do you think? If you tried hard enough, if you tried. I'm not trying to be difficult. This final poem, I'm sorry, I'm feeling very immature because I'm trying not to laugh. This one's called Invoking the Penises of Paralyzed Men. Thank you, Jen, for asking me to read this. You know when you're trying hard to be professionals of paralyzed men. Wait, I've already done it. Darn it, this limp thing I meant to critique when non-disabled poets do it, and they love to do it again and again and again. Don't think about the penis. Don't think about the penis. They say, we are understanding, we are potent, and you sadly are not. Not really, but no less human for it. Well, maybe a little, but no more human too, truly. For all that limp, exposed vulnerability, I've done it, again. I walk with a limp. I know a paralyzed man who does too. Zip your mind. The penis is a symbol, never not. Whenever you read penis, think about something else. Sunshine, empire, religious sacrifice. Think Gandhi, the Lama, the Pope. Think the politics of penises, pissing and pissing off, and, oh yes, fucking. Whether 'tis nobler to fuck or to be fucked. And what's the difference? That was it. Just a little immature. Well, the poem has a little bit of immaturity to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So we actually have a good amount of time in front of us for discussion because the next panel has been pushed a little bit. Do I need to speak into the microphone? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we do have a good 20, 25 minutes for discussion. So perhaps I'll just ask for questions from the floor and I'll bring you the microphone. Maybe I'll do some microphone running back and forth for people to help out. So are there any questions for any of the panelists? Okay, great. I can also start things off. So, Cheryl, I have one question to begin with. There were many things that you mentioned and showcased in your film that had me thinking. But you said at one point, well, you talked near the end about your collaborative approach to audio description. And I'm just wondering what surprises you when you ask this, if this is part of your practice. Generally, are there things that surprise you?
Yeah, I like that question. One thing that surprised me was some of the descriptions they gave weren't very visually descriptive. And so I felt surprised, like, well, that's not really an audio description. Because I'm a very inflexible person. So then I started thinking more about why am I so tied to the audio description has to be a particular way, and if I'm going to ask you, how would you like me to describe you, and you tell me, and then I tell you that wasn't good enough, or it was wrong? Wait a minute. So I think if I had had more time, I would have done more collaboration I would have done a conversation with them and explained what I'm looking for in terms of audio description and what the purpose of it is, and maybe would have been able to have more conversation when I hear something like, I think Kiersey said that she has CP, which is not very visual. If I'd had time, I would have had more of a conversation. But I have worked with other people with physical disabilities who will just give me their diagnosis. And I'll say, well, how would you like me to describe how you're walking and moving? Just say I have CP. And I haven't figured out, this is my shortcoming, I haven't figured out how to have that dialogue be rich and productive and not sound judgmental on my part. Again, no, you didn't give me enough info. And if somebody's telling me, I don't want you to describe how I move, what do? However, the camera's on you and I'm seeing how you're moving. So there's so much tension, and so maybe I overstated by saying collaborating, because this one was not super collaborative, but
Word that I use.
no, I used it, you. I was overstating myself, but it was participatory. I got the participation, and I think that also that was so much earlier on in my training as an audio describer. I didn't know what to do with this information. Now I think I feel more ready to talk to people, and I described someone recently. He's deaf, and so he wasn't going to hear my audio description. So I sent him the script, and he had a correction about the way I said he looked. Just a description of his beard was not okay with him, and he gave me a better description for his beard. It was so much better than what I said anyway. But I had the joy of knowing that this was not going to go out in the world with me saying a word about how he looks that felt bad to him. So that was very motivating for me to remember to really make it more of a dialogue when I can. Yeah, I like that question. Thank you.
Other questions from people?
Hey, I have a question for Matt. You had touched on it at the beginning of your talk, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the tension that I think a lot of research creation practitioners feel, and that's the tension between creative output and academic talk or academic synopsis, and how you walk that tightrope, or are you being pulled, one direction or the other in your position?
Okay, so I got this job at UBC, and I got the contract. In the contract, it said you must apply for tri-council funding in the first 2 years. And I've lived on arts grants for years. So I knew how to get grants, but tri-council funding was this whole other thing. So at first I was pretty distraught, to be honest. And I didn't know what I was going to do, and I still don't know what I'm doing. Like I've had a couple of SSHRC grants now, and I've done a few others. I've managed to sort of figure out how to live in that space, but I don't know how exactly to draw it back to, like, I really just want to walk around and look at flowers and write poems about them. Like, that's all I really want to do. So in other ways, though, I think it's been very productive. Ashok Mehta, who's the head of graduate studies at OCAD, who was my head when I was hired, he really helped me sort of navigate what that might be like, and it did give me a way to connect a whole bunch of kind of cultural organizing and activism that I had done for a long time that was in many ways disconnected. They weren't disconnected in my heart between the poems and those things that I was doing. Like playing, played soccer with the street soccer team for a long time. I did lots of kinds of that kind of activism. So I think that sort of social value of the artwork is the place that is sort of the wedge in which I try to push into the academic aspect. And then the other is to look for true academics to be my partners on things. So that's my current strategy, and it's working okay.
Question?
My question is also for Matt. I'm also somebody with a chronic illness who deals with pharmaceuticals, etc. When you were talking about adrenaline, it really, really struck me. And I'm going to quote you back, that you were full of the drug our bodies produce when we fear for our lives. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, I guess, your thoughts around the ways in which, like, you feel and think about drugs and the ways our bodies interface with them.
That is such a good and uncomfortable question. There are days I actually feel very dismayed about it, to be totally honest. Over the years, I have tried many, many things, and even my little list of things is really only some of the things. There's a commercial, capitalist, industrial side of pharmaceuticals that I think, the Western medicine, all it can do is cut things off of you and kill organisms in your body. That's really, my Chinese doctor used to say, if you're in a car accident and you need to put your arm back on, go to the hospital, otherwise come see me. And over time I have moved further and further away from pharmaceuticals and from Western medicines, although I still go to the clinic every week. I imagine my future where I don't take any pharmaceuticals. And I used to think that was an impossible thing to imagine, and I don't think it is impossible. But that's what I would prefer. That's that's so I'm trying to live out that imagine. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly, but I'm sure, yes.
Can you please repeat what your Chinese doctor said to you?
Oh, the Chinese doctor, his name was Dali Lin. He told me if you are in a car accident and they need to put your arm back on, you should go to the hospital. But otherwise, you should come see him. And I did, like several times a week for many years. And it really changed my life, not because of the medicine he gave me, and not because of the Chinese practices. We did all kinds of different Chinese medicine practices. It was that he did it for free. That's it. That was it. He did it for free. So the whole relationship was just because he wanted to. And I think that changed every possible, like, it opened up. I never thought that was possible. And then made all of the other things I thought were impossible seem possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm jumping back in and apologize if this maybe has been spoken to already. I was wondering, Cheryl, about your work as I understand, some of it being with different, with people who've survived different degrees of traumatic brain injury. I'm curious about experience of navigating ways that some people's particular like cognitive impacts and such may be in conflict with each other's needs, and how you navigate how your experience has been navigating those situations so far.
Oh, it's all the time. I mean, even me, when I was filming my documentary, I couldn't go to some of the shoots. Like we filmed a high school graduation. There's no way, I can't even have the 20 of y'all clap your hands. So there were shoots that we did where I couldn't attend as the director and producer of the film because the needs of the people living their lives were in conflict with me living my life. I'd have to skip a shoot because I had a seizure in the middle of the night. I'm like, crew, you go out and film tomorrow. I just gotta lie here and cry. I don't know what's going on. And I'd fall asleep on set. So there's that side, which I think doesn't get talked about a lot because it's supposed to be embarrassing. That I was producing this film, this product, and I couldn't always be present in the process of production. But in terms of filming people, I will say that my work now is all cross disability. There's nobody in the film you saw today who would identify with a traumatic brain injury. Although the two people with CP, I always tell them they're lucky. They got their start much earlier than I did. Oh, so lucky, love it. But that conflicting, sure. I mean, scheduling is a big one. Remembering that we were doing a film shoot. I didn't always remember. Or we would show up and the person wasn't there because they didn't remember we were filming them. Or we might write an address down and the person, because of their dyslexia, reads the address wrong and we don't show up to the same place for the shoot. Am I answering kind of on the lines that you're asking? Because I'm giving very kind of impairment-based answers and I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for.
I suppose I'm curious about maybe the degree of transparency about these experiences as you are making aspects of the work public. I wonder about what happens when more people who identify as abled and people with different kinds of disability identifications actually learn about the amount of challenges we can have in meeting each other's needs, but still proceeding onward anyway. And I'm curious about kind of like maybe your learning process in your variety of projects over time and how that's how you see that having effects kind of with the larger communities of people are in contact with?
Yeah, so I'm deeply transparent. I'm a big fan of disclosing, and sometimes I'm only going to disclose my access need, and sometimes I'm going to disclose why I have it, but something will be disclosed. As soon as people start turning it to the, oh my God, you had a TBI and you made a film, your film is so good, from the people who haven't seen the film. As soon as it turns to that, I change the conversation to things around, now all the words have escaped me. Come on, Leah's book, care work, Stacey Melbourne, interdependence and care webs and I can't, what are the words? The book is in my backpack, but it's gonna take me a year to find it. But I turn it away from, oh, how special, and oh, all these extra things that you have to do to make your film, and oh, how hard. I turn it to conversations of interdependence and how we are all doing something to work together to meet each other's needs. And now I've lost track of if I'm answering that part of the question, but I'm very transparent. But as soon as it turns down that inspiration porn special road, no. This is about economics. This is about access to resources. I am not amazing because I made a film. I got access to resources. I got access to the money to hire a professional crew who could film while I was taking another nap at Motel 6. So, yeah, I try to keep it away from special, but be transparent if it's going to help elevate the work of disabled people and the existence of disabled people.
There's a question over there, yeah. Are there other people who have questions that they definitely want to ask, just so I can manage the time we have left? Kim has a question, I believe. Okay. There's two of you.
Hi, my name's Selena. I had a question for Kathy, or sorry, Cheryl. Sorry, memory, I mess sometimes. So I was wondering, when you're talking about kind of when you're asking people to describe themselves and how it wasn't exactly what you were looking for. So I've also worked on films, and I work with a lot of different people that don't generally get their voices heard. And the thing is, I struggled a lot with kind of meeting goals with that too, because I don't want to stop people from expressing themselves, and I don't want to force people to express themselves how they don't want to. But at the same time, sometimes, I was a mentor for an accessibility design challenge here earlier, and I struggled to hold space because I had a hard time in one instance to tell someone that they were actually taking up too much space. And someone who I talked to after, who was facilitating, was like, that's like inherently ableistic that you did that, because you're treating them differently because of, I think like my point is clear. So I was wondering how you negotiate that line of not actually being ableistic and not, and by assuming that, or not assuming, by kind of acting in that way of like, oh, well, I don't want to, like kind of like adding a lot of cushions around what needs to be done for it. Sorry, I'm not expressing this the way I wanted to, that I wrote down, but do you kind of see where I'm coming from?
I think I might, yeah. Well,
Okay.
one thing is I've got this ableism as trash t-shirt on for myself as much as anyone else. I'm not saying that the way I did it was anti-ableist. Maybe it was ableist. Really, I was under a time crunch, and I was like, I lack the imagination skills to come up with the appropriate way to have the dialogue. It really was like, I don't know what to say to them. But for me, the way I approach it with each project is consistency within that one project. There are times where for a variety of reasons, the race or ethnicity or skin tone will never get described in a project for various reasons. If I'm on a project and I'm gonna say something about the skin tone of one person, I'm gonna say it about everyone, no matter what the filmmaker comes back at me with. Well, why did you? Nope. If you want me to say it for that one, I gotta say it for all y'all. So trying to find that consistency, and you said something about goals. What is the end goal? Why am I describing the way something looks? And I was talking, does anybody know Thomas Reed from Read My Mind Radio? Subscribe right now. Read My Mind, R-E-I-D. He is basically just fabulous. And he he's got this podcast, and it's a lot around his experiences with blindness, but talking to other blind people and talking to people who serve blind community. It's just fabulous. And he and I talk on the phone about audio description and just nerd out about it. And I've got my, I'm trained in audio description, and he's got, I'm a consumer. And so there have been times where we've kind of been surprised to hear each other's point of view, but we need each other's point of view. And I hadn't thought of it this way, but he said, you audio describers, you are the director. You are the director of this version of the film. And so how do you meet the original film director's goals? But what does a film director do? Decides what the audience should have. And so the audio describer has to be some kind of director. And I don't know that it's always inherently anti-ableist. And I mean, I don't know that it's 100% of the time anti-ableist to say or not say you're taking up too much space to someone. Depends on who you are, depends on why they're taking up space, depends on why you're having the reaction that you're having. It's very nuanced. And I think that audio description has to also be nuanced too, but in the end it has to be fair. And that's another thing Thomas and I talk about is, he didn't know, he watched Black Panther, he didn't know that there was like an image of the continent of Africa on the top of a spaceship. I haven't seen it, but spaceship, is there a spaceship in it? Yeah, on the top of the spaceship. Long after he saw it, somebody mentioned him, oh yeah, that it, he's like, what? The audio describer didn't say that? If the director's gonna put the thought and the effort and the resources into putting that piece of art in the film, why would you not tell the audience? That's super ableist, but it's also super white supremacist to be like, but that detail, whatever, it's just some colors. I think that any discussion of anti-ableism has to also be anti-white supremacist. Now I'm just talking in circles. Anyway, did I answer anything that you were asking?
I'll process for a while then.
Come find me again, and we'll process separately and together over and over. Okay.
Was there another question on this end of the? No? Okay.
Thank you. I had a question that's kind of maybe for everyone, but that sort of struck me as I was both watching and listening to all the, I want to say, performances in a sense, which is the kind of graphic quality of your film, Cheryl, that's so deliberate and so beautiful, and the way you use kind of graphic design as a filmmaker, and play with those things that can be annoying, like the squares and the triangles that are black, and then kind of incorporate it in almost Kandinsky way into the film visually. So I like that, but also the kind of way that the audio transcription, even though you felt it was sparse, I kept thinking about Matt's and is it Jim's work as well, is the way that it almost became like thought bubble poetry that was kind of connecting in a different way to the kind of testimonies that are in the film. And so I thought it's kind of audio just transcription that maybe isn't trying to pretend to give us a full picture, but is in a sense giving us a different kind of dialogue between the audio description and the describer of the sparseness of the scene and the tones and the voices of the things that are there. So I just wondered if there's ways of also thinking about also the graphic qualities of the poem, which leave a lot of blank space, and also a lot of spaces in between, and have fewer words and less sparseness that can be extremely evocative. Because I wonder if sometimes we think more is better, when sometimes less can also create a conversation or spark a thought or be a form of communication that maybe from the realm of poetry we need to also maybe think about.
I loved the audio description, partly because I didn't even really notice it as such. And what I like about it more than anything is that you clearly made an aesthetic choice about that thing. It's not an additional thing. It is the thing, which is what I have learned the most from working with artists who identify or who have been identified as disabled. That they, in working with other artists, so much much is transformed. And that's what I most am excited about.
I just want to respond to what you just said, and it's just what I think.
Yes.
It's not didactic. See, I think that you don't have to give up art to be an academic or a teacher or a researcher or something like that, because I think good academics are very artful.
I agree, 100%.
I mean, it's a struggle when you're up looking at tri-arts grants, whatever that is. It sounds like an uphill battle. But anyway, I just wanted to say that there's an aesthetic to smart academic work.
I 100% agree with you.
And useful and productive.
Yes.
Contributive to a better zeitgeist.
I 100% agree with you. All I can tell you is that they don't really care about my 14 lines about the flower. Like, I'm still going to do that, and there's, in fact, actually, it does bring up a really important thing, which is that, like, I've been thinking, for example, about social gathering, public space, public talk as art. Like, this is an art, social art practice, and of course the classroom is, and all those, you know, that even the department meeting has its own, like, or it can, right? And so that part is not lost on me, and I appreciate you reminding me of it.
A little harder to find in the department meeting, but it's there.
There's always hilarity, at the very least.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something about Jim's poems?
Yeah, I've had so many ideas just bubbling up in this conversation. One thing I wanted to respond to about the audio description choices is that I think this is a problem that is common to artists, people who provide accommodations, and also to critics, is not having language to describe disabled bodies. And so often we end up talking around what someone is doing because to use the word sounds pejorative, because we don't have the language, and the language that we do have is so imbued with judgment that it's difficult. So in thinking about Yulia and Eric as dance artists, Eric is dancing, so we have to describe his body. And so as an artist, he's making his body available to be read. So this is a representational conundrum I'm really fascinated by. And especially as we are trained not to look at disabled people while at the same time staring at them, we don't know how to look even, because we look but you're not really looking. And then there's that thing where you're looking but trying hard not to look like you're looking. So in all that cultural swamp, it's really difficult to be precise. And in your work, I found the precision of your language just really, really beautiful. And I just wanted to throw that in. But I wanted to show you this. So I was trying to, how about hold up both of them? So there's two poems here. One of them, the language is in pieces scattered at different parts of the page, so it's not linear and the eye can't track it. So I was having to make choices as I was reading. And then in this one, it's very, you're a poet, what kind of, so sometimes it's just like, you can use a specific academic term for the kind of poem the layout is, but if you're not poets, that might not even resonate with you. But it's a phrase and then a couple words, a phrase and a couple words, alternating. I don't know what the form is.
It's like a strophic form where it's basically couplets with one long line and a second line following it, and they're in jammed, so they follow the grammar and the syntax moves across the stanzas and the lines. And this is like what Charles Olson would have called proprioception. the page as a field or as its own body, right? That you might. So an interesting thing is at Guantanamo Bay in the interrogation manuals or records, there are a lot of poems written, and they are by policy all redacted because poems may have secret codes. But they don't just redact the words, they redact the whole page because the white space also has meaning.
That's really insightful. Jim has a really wonderful essay called The Enjammed Body. And he writes about how the structure and form and rhythm of his poetry is informed by the way he walks. He has one leg that's longer than the other, and the shorter leg has a very large lift. I would say, I don't know, how many inches is that? Like 8?
4 or 5.
Yeah, it's almost a foot. I mean, it's a very tall boot. So there's the length and kind of a roll. And so he talks about how his poetry takes the rhythm and the shape of his body. And we spent Thanksgiving together. He's a very, very dear and long-term friend of mine, and he read some of the poetry to me. So I was trying to kind of channel parts that I knew he thought were funny or some of how he read, but then also, you know, I'm a theater person, so I had my own take on it. And then also, I was thinking about, there's embodying oneself, and then embodying others who you're describing, and then the same way as performing a poem, there's I immaturely commented on the gender portion, but some of that joke doesn't necessarily read if you're cis male and cis female. It doesn't read, so in a way commenting on it kind of made it more legible. But it just kind of struck me then about, I think that there are ways that we connect and disconnect amongst ourselves and across each other, and it's all an act of translation, right? So anyway, this was live streamed, right? I don't know, maybe Jim's seeing it.
Well, thank you to our panelists. Please join me in gently putting your hands together. Thank you very much for a very stimulating and interesting series of talks which can continue. Certainly we have a 10-minute break. It's going to happen now, so this room will come back together at 4:25. The next presentation I've been asked to explain is in French, but we do have headsets that will have a form of translation provided into English, so you can pick those up at the registration desk. You need a piece of ID, I believe, to get the headset.
I have a question, will it be relatively loud or noisy? I won't be in town. You won't? Okay. Yeah.
I don't know much about the next panel, but okay. We'll see. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is going to the room. This is going to the translators. You see it's quite loud. You could make it louder, but for these purposes, they might ask you going down the room system.